we have a quorum then?
We do, yeah.
Oh. Great. Welcome everyone to today's meeting, March 7th, of the Economic Development Committee. I'd like to call the roll, please.
Sure. Committee Member Brown.
Here.
Committee Member Kane and Charles are not here. Committee Member Chasty.
Here.
Committee Member Sala is also absent. Committee Member Tiedemann.
Here.
And Chair Montag.
Yep. Great. So the next item is approval of minutes from February 7th, 2019.
So moved.
We have a motion. Any discussion?
I move that we approve the minutes.
We have a second? We have a motion
Second,
here.
Okay.
She can move and I'll second. How's that?
Okay, you can move. It's Robert will second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Great. Item 3, public comment. So this is for any discussion that's not on the agenda or any items people want to bring up that are not on the agenda. I don't see anyone in the audience. Anyone in the committee have anything they want to bring up? Okay, moving on, closing public comment. Number 4, announcements.
Yeah, so we just have a few quick announcements. Item 4-1, 1175 Solano Avenue. The staff has spoken to the property owner, and apparently he is in serious talks with 2 potential tenants that he's looking forward to hopefully signing the deal with relatively soon. So that means the previous Cantina del Sol tenant space should be occupied in the near future.
I assume they're restaurant tenants?
Yeah, I believe based on what he was saying, he wanted something with coffee and or pastries. So he didn't really dispel what exactly each tenant was providing, but he said he's getting majority of what he would like. Mm-hmm. And then the next update is 987 San Pablo Avenue. That was right across the street from City Hall, the DH Walsh Volvo Auto Shop. That's now going to be a new tire shop. So that should be coming online relatively soon as well. And then next item 4-3, we have the Albany Subaru showroom that is about to begin its construction if it hasn't already begun. They just finished the service center and now they're moving on to the showroom. So that facade improvement should be underway in addition to tenant improvements, yeah. And then lastly, we just quick Berkeley site article posted a little clip indicating the 80th anniversary of the Hotsy Totsy. So if you guys want to read that article, it's available online, but just celebrating a long-term Albany business here. Yep.
Great. Any comments from the committee on this? Yeah.
Do we let the record reflect that staff was very supportive of the Hotsy Totsy Club?
Let the record show. Anything else? Any comments from the public on that item?
Reopen public comment?
No. Well, let me ask. So is that something that we entertain typically, reopening of public comment?
I'm sorry, what was
The question was, do we typically reopen public comment?
I think that's fine.
Okay, yes, go ahead. Yeah.
It's up to the chair.
Todd Abbott, Albany resident business owner and on the board of the Chamber of Commerce, Todd Abbott Association. I just want to speak quickly in support of the idea of some of the sugar-sweetened beverage tax money being put toward a public restroom. I think the Greenway would be a location, but this is something I feel pretty strongly about. As part of the Blue Glove crew, I can say that we have been finding human waste at various places, and that's, you know, on and off over the years. So there's definitely a need. So that would be something that I would really push for. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other comments? No? All right, we'll close it and we'll move on to item 5, presentation of recent changes in commercial parking supply.
I'm going to pass this around.
Why didn't we share? Do we share?
Jennifer. I'm passing around a spreadsheet, and also I'll bring it up on the screen. This, I think, is probably, well, maybe not as readable on the screen as I hope, but you'll be able to get it off the paper copy. This is, I labeled it draft because there may be other situations or other locations that you want to add or take off from this list, but I know there's a question comes up a lot. How many parking spaces have been lost for various reasons in the commercial district over the last few years? And this is a first draft at trying to give you that answer. I've divided it into two areas. One is the top section is Solano and San Pablo, basically everything except University Village. And then the second part is University Village, and then the grand total. So to kind of summarize what you're looking at, column 2 there is what was street parking prior to the project, whatever action that was taken. The projects that are listed on the left-hand side. Then column 3, 4, and 5 is what happened after the completion of the project. So to just kind of quickly run through these, the new building in 1137 Solano, which was approved in 2010, I think it went in 2012 or 2013. They did lose some street parking spaces. They in order to create a driveway, in order that they have what was then the required number of resident parking. So there was a net loss of street parking, but in addition of 6 residential parking spaces. The second row, AC Transit bus stop, that's something that's been approved but not executed by AC Transit. That would result in the loss of a parking space on San Pablo.
Is that the one in front of Max's?
Yes. And incidentally, I'm just focusing on this, on the physical space itself, whether it's green zones or blue zones or what have you. I haven't gotten into that at this level, at least. If that's something that you want to further explore, that's fine as well. The third row is Caltrans recently, probably about 2 or 3 months ago, upgraded some of the pedestrian crossings on San Pablo. And as part of that, they created some red zones in front of the pedestrian crossings so motorists can see the pedestrian entering the crosswalk. That's something that they're mandated to do. So we lost 7 parking spaces. Our estimate is the 7 spaces were lost there. The senior center, as part of the implementation of the speed hump and pedestrian crossing there, there was a reduction of 6 spaces, 5 spaces. At the 900 block of Masonic, this is...
A question here.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff, if I read the Caltrans pedestrian crosses, we started with 7 and ended up with 0.
Right, so there were spaces that were...
So we lost them completely.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I'm reading it.
Well, I have a comment on that later, but that's okay.
Senior Center project, the new speed hump and pedestrian crossing, again, the same thing happened in order to create room for that speed hump and to improve visibility. Some spaces were lost there. The 900 block of Masonic, I'm not exactly sure when this was executed. I couldn't find it readily available. But in the last few years, we created some turn pockets there, right turn and left turn pockets. These are people going north on Masonic, approaching Solano Avenue. And so some spaces were lost there in order to create room for the turn pockets. And another bus stop related project is kind of related to the San Pablo bus stop relocation. Part of one element of the stop for the 18 is going to be shifted. Again, it's been approved but not executed by City Transit. They're going to have the 18 buses turn the corner and park in front of Mr. Dewey's, and that will result in the loss of 4 spaces. So that's the summary for the Solano San Pablo areas. The Belmont Village and UC Village retail projects are pretty self-explanatory. There were a considerable number of street parking spaces along San Pablo that were lost as a part of the implementation of that project, but a significant number of new parking spaces were created within the project for the residents at Belmont Village and for the residents and employees at Belmont Village and for customers at the retail shops. So depending on how you look at this, it's either been a significant drop or a significant increase in parking. Overall, there has been an increase in parking, but it's the amount of street parking has indeed gone down.
So just to be clear, so there's a loss of 26 parking spaces of street parking? Yes, there's a loss of 26 street parking spaces in Solano and San Pablo commercial districts, excepting for the UC Village project. Right.
The way I read it was the pre-project amount was 83, and now we have 26, so we lost the difference, no?
No.
Because we had 12, then it became 9, we had 7, and then it became 6, we had 7, and it became 0. So it would be the difference between the two, wouldn't it?
So, I'm sorry, maybe I misunderstood. Are you looking at the grand total for both? Maybe it was confusing to divide out Belmont Village and UC Village retail.
Well, if the grand total of column 2 is 83, that was what we had before these projects, and the grand total of column 3, which is what we had after the projects, is 26, then the loss would be the difference. The loss wouldn't be 26, right?
I agree with you. That's right. So the math is 57, but keep in mind for the UC Village project, there's considerably more parking available now for customers and residents.
Right, but that was my question. So is it 26 loss of parking, or is it the 47 57?
Grand total, it's a loss of 57 street parking spaces.
Okay.
Street parking spaces.
Thank you. Robert?
So the thing about the Belmont Village, those spaces are introduced because we're bringing in new people to live there and giving them parking for themselves, right?
Yes.
So it's not a net gain to the public. That's their own parking, right? It's like as if we had an apartment house go up on Solano and 4 units, and we had either 4 or 8 or how, right?
Right.
So
Yeah, it's not a public parking facility.
Right. So in other words, the most realistic way to look at this is that we're down 57 spaces.
That's fine, yeah.
Wow.
Question?
Actually, yes, and before I even, the question comes with all due respect because I so appreciate the fact that this was actually put down on paper. So in respect to, let's say, the Hotsy Totsy, where the city has said that they've lost 1 parking space, there's a difference in the practical amount of parking that you have and then the legal parking space that you have. So for instance, in front of Hotsy, if you look at the curb space before the driveway where the burrito truck parks and the end of the street, they count that as 1 space, but really 2 cars used to park there. The same thing with Masonic, even though they had designated white spaces, they're counting those spaces, but the reality is that many more cars parked there, depending on the scope and size of those cars. So these numbers, I think, are really conservative.
Thank you.
Scary and conservative.
Got it. Any other comment on that before we continue? Okay.
Is there anything else you'd like us to do with this? Would you like more information?
I was going to look over it over the next couple of weeks, but this is fantastic. Thank you. This is exactly what I've been asking for, and it's perfect. Thank you. Thanks for taking the time, Jeff. I know you're a busy guy, so.
Could we continue a parking discussion?
This needs to be on our agenda.
On the next agenda?
Yeah, this needs to be on our agenda.
All right. Any other comments or questions on this item? Open it up to public comment. Seeing none, then we'll move on. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, Jeff. This was awesome. Thank you.
So now we're on item 6, I believe, which is discussion and possible motion on Solano Avenue Complete Streets Planning Process. Do we have a presentation on that?
I do. I'm going to try to go through this resolution as quickly as possible. I need new glasses. I I'm going to try to go through this real quickly. I realize that you like to have an efficient meeting, and we greatly appreciate that. But this is a really important study, and there's some issues that have come up that I think you'll want to weigh in on. What you have before you this evening that's provided to you is a draft plan for, and it's a vision for improvements to Solano Avenue. And we're focusing on the portion of Solano Avenue east of Masonic, basically. You all probably know this, or almost certainly know it, but I'll just say it just to make sure that, to refresh your memory, the Solano roadway and sidewalks are the responsibility of the city of Albany all the way up to Tulare. Although on the north side of the street, the businesses beginning in mid-block, 1500 block, in the middle of the Safeway block, the businesses on the north side of the street are located in Berkeley. The street and the sidewalks are our responsibilities, and so we've gone all the way up to Tulare for this study. And it's long been recognized that this is an area that needs a lot of attention. The planning effort that you have before you began 4 years ago, back in 2015, with a grant application that we submitted to Caltrans to prepare this planning study. The grant was awarded in 2017. We went through a process of hiring consultants to prepare the report. A little bit about the consultants. It's led by an organization called, or a consulting firm called Tool Design Group. They're a nationwide firm. Their Berkeley office is leading this effort. They partnered with Opticos, which is a well-known Berkeley-based urban design firm, and with the Local Government Commission, which is an oddly named but very well-respected nonprofit that does work statewide in developing sustainability-related projects and policies for California municipalities. The goals of this study were to, as I mentioned, address some of the well-known challenges and issues that we have with this segment of Solano Avenue. The streets, one of the underlying issues and challenges is that all the streets are offset. And so you don't have normal, like, cross intersections that make life easier for urban designers and engineers. So pedestrian pathways are not very good. Lighting is not very good. It's a busy transit street, so there's a lot of activity with buses. It's also our only east-west truck route. And then there are, I think it's fair to say that the streetscape improvements, the planting areas and the sidewalks and so forth have kind of reached the end of their lives and could use are not very exciting anymore. I mean, don't contribute to any sort of vibrancy or economic activity. And it's an 80-foot wide street, which is in engineering terms not a lot of room to do a lot of different things. So what I'd like to do real quickly, I'm sure you've gone through it and looked at some of the proposals, just to run through these real quickly to refresh your memory, some of the elements of it. And these are just kind of in random order, trying to create interesting places, encourage public art as an example, to design it and to have a policy to design it so that there's some flexibility and maybe how things are used change over time. So something that begins as a parklet can become a parking space, or the other way around. Account for bicycle parking and other types of activities in the public right-of-way. Mentioned buses and parklets, that's all the rage these days, and people really seem to enjoy having these places to kind of hang out, and really changes the vibe of the street in a lot of communities. Parking is always an issue. You just had an agenda item about it, and we understand that. We came into this really with a little bit of a different focus. We didn't want to turn this into a parking study. By virtue of the some modernization of the AC Transit bus stops, there's an opportunity to create additional parking spaces, which could also be used for other activities if that's desired. But as the plan that's on paper before you actually increases the number of parking spaces a little bit. There's also been some discussion about the advantages of back-end angle parking, and as a part of this discussion, we've understand that there is a strong desire to do a demonstration project of some sort in the near future before any of this is executed, and we think that's a good idea, and we can come back to you with the details of that if that's something the City Council ultimately authorizes us to pursue. A few other elements of this, creating a sense of place with graphics and branding and signage and so forth. And then just creating, using the opportunity of refreshing the street to bring in interesting visual improvements to things like bus stops, how we landscape the area, and street lights and so forth. And these are just representative examples of the kinds of things other communities are doing that really creates kind of an interesting and, again, more vibrant area. The roadway itself, there are things that we can do there to both improve the safety and make it a more attractive area. Pavers or make it can highlight a particular pedestrian crossing or other safety element, and also the pedestrian refuge islands in the middle. So it gives a place where people can, if they want to go halfway across the street, and if there's traffic is heavy, it's a sort of a safe place to go halfway across the street and wait for traffic to continue through. We also, in the report, talked a little bit about truck loading areas. I don't want to take too much more time, but I think it's important to make sure that this report is considered in context of the life of a project, a public improvement project. This is a plan. It's not a design. It's not a final decision about any particular element of a project. The main thing here that we're trying to do is create a vision that people in the community can get behind to move forward. And that involves listening to people, trying to understand the issues that we have today, and move towards a solution that works for everybody. As I mentioned, the idea of doing a test pilot project with back-end angle parking is a logical next step. You can also do temporary treatments of various types with paints and signage just to see how people like it and if it creates the activities and energy that we hope that, or safety improvements that we would hope. Our next steps, with the completion of the project, the next steps would be to begin to break the project into pieces and begin to put those pieces into our capital improvement program budget. This is a important but bureaucratic document where our Public Works Department basically lays out the schedule. They identify the money that's available over the next 5 years, and they schedule out the different projects to expend those funds for improvements to the public infrastructure. We'd also use this report as the basis for seeking outside funding opportunities. There's various opportunities that come up for grant funds or certain funds that are allocated to the city, but we need to go through other agencies in order to get it. And then ultimately, once we get some money that's sufficient to execute one of the elements of the project, we would begin the formal design. We'd come back, and that's where many of the details are sorted out, exactly where pieces of infrastructure go, where the conflicts are, and that's realistically probably a few years off, at least a couple years off, I would guess, before we really get into the formal engineered design phase. As I mentioned briefly, there are different ways in implementing it. There are short-term, medium-term, and long-term types of improvements we can use. As I said, you can paint a curb just to see whether that's something that seems to work, and then over time use different pavement surfaces and maybe ultimately completely rebuild the street. In terms of next steps with this plan, we're looking forward to additional public comments through March 11th. We've picked that date so that we've got a little bit of time to work with our consultants to absorb those public comments, think them through, and bring it back to City Council. Tentatively, it's April 15th is the date that we're targeting to bring this back to City Council for their discussion and possible acceptance of the report. So I went through a lot there pretty quickly, but I'm happy to answer questions now or later on after as part of your discussion.
So, do we have any questions or comments from the Commissioner? Please.
I had a couple of things. First, a lot of work's been put into this, and that's great. I think it's been a lot of, there's been a lot of positive thought about what to do about East Solano. I think that's wonderful. I had a couple of thoughts, though. First is that, I think to follow up on Jeff's comment, it's a street that has a limited capacity to do all the wonderful things that we want to do on it. And so I don't know if we'll be able to do them all. On the easy side, there are some things we can do that make a lot of sense. I love the back-end angle parking. It's much safer. In fact, if you deal with companies like AT&T and PG&E, they always tell their guys to back in. It's much safer to do it. It's safer for the vehicles. It's safer for the rest of the traffic on the street and pedestrians and bicyclists. So in that sense, I think at least doing a pilot project is a good idea. The branding. We have a real Main Street. And a lot of the places that are creating these things in the suburbs are creating these faux main streets. And they make these kind of cutesy branding things, and they're nice and everything, but there's something authentic about Solano Avenue, and I would hate to see us chase a model that is really chasing us. I mean, we're the thing that they're trying to reproduce by all their branding and design. So we ought not to give up the real thing to become faux branded. The parking problems, we should, this is a hard one for me. I mean, I've been involved with merchants associations on Solano Avenue for, well, since Abe Lincoln was in office. And so it's a difficult situation to figure out what to do. You have to be able to allow the trucks to come up and do their deliveries. If you shrink the street so that they can't do it, you're going to damage the ability of the merchants to function. If you eliminate the parking spaces because of other good uses, you're going to damage the merchants. Unless you can figure out how to turn it into a pedestrian mall, which is a big leap and a major change in what we've been doing. So if you're going to make a cultural change like that on the street, you really should engage the public for a longer period of time and let them understand that that's what we're talking about. I'm not out and out opposed to it, but right now Solano works. And if we're going to make a mess of it by going through a long and lengthy construction period where shops are going to have to be closed and access is going to be limited, you know, we need to be thinking about that carefully before we do it. Landscaping. I notice a lot of landscaping suggestions, and I love landscaping. I think it's a great idea. But Albany and Berkeley have been very lackadaisical about really keeping it up. So I'm not in favor of putting in a whole bunch of landscaping that's going to require more maintenance and more staff time that's not going to be done. And so we'll end up with really tawdry looking sort of landscaping. It'd be better to do something that is more attractive with bricks or tiles or something like that that would be permanent, that wouldn't require the maintenance and would still give you some similar sense of artistic effort. Art on the street is a great idea. Street trees, there's a bunch of discussion about the street trees. You can do with 3 or 4 mature trees what it takes 10 or 15 immature trees to accomplish. So setting up bulb outs that have significant ability to have a tree get tall enough so that the branches don't become an obstruction for cars and pedestrians and bicycles, and give you a shade area and give you a certain sense of beauty can be done. You just have to pick the right tree to do it and let the tree grow. And when the tree cracks up the sidewalk, you fix the sidewalk and give the tree room. And this is the case I've seen in a couple of trees that are probably marked for destruction because they're grown too big. But 1 or 2 of these trees on the street is sufficient to do the entire street. So I think that street trees can do a lot if you allow them to do it. I have some other thoughts. I don't want to get occupy too much of time. I will just say one thing about the pavers for crossing the street, which are a great idea, and I love them. And they had them on Solano Avenue. None of you are old enough to remember this, but they had them on Solano Avenue in the 70s, and so many people slipped on them and fell on their butts that they took them out. So you need to make sure if you're going to put in something that it's not going to become a slip trip hazard when you get a little bit of road drippings, you know, from the cars, and then you have a little bit of water and zoom. I mean, asphalt, the bitumen that we use is amazingly resilient and amazingly slip-free. So that's all I'll say for now.
Thank you.
I want to close with thanks to all the people that have been working on this. A lot of good thoughts gone into it, and I'm really proud of the work everybody's been doing.
Great, thank you. I'll look over here now. Yes.
Hi. As a senior, I have to say back-in parking is terrifying. And I think, you know, the population of Albany is the second largest population are the seniors. So I think you really have to take them in consideration in when deciding on what kind of parking you're going to have. The other thing is murals. I think you have to take those into consideration also, because it has to be good art, and it shouldn't, if it's in a business district, it shouldn't, I don't think, have political commentary. And I think maybe that money would be better spent on signage. And anyway, there are good murals and there are bad murals, and it's, you know, I'd hate to see something not just first rate go up. So I think you'd keep our eye on that. Another thing are window boxes. If the parks, someone said in the Transportation Committee meeting that the pocket parks attract trash. People throw their soda bottles and paper wrappers into them. And in East Hampton, they work with window boxes and flower planters. And those are easy to keep up, they're inexpensive, and it would be up to the store, the business, to do the watering of the flower boxes, which it takes away from the city anyway. So I thought that was a thought. And in the fundraising, I thought that you could offer benches and various items to the public or to the a business or to individuals, that they could have a plaque on a bench, for instance, that they donated that bench, and they of course would pay a fee for that. So that's about what I saw in this.
Great, thank you.
I have quite a few thoughts that are a little bit scattered because I wrote them down as I was reading through the packet. But I think overall it was really well thought out and very thorough. I do think that we need to be very careful about the balancing of many different interests. But from a economic development point of view, I definitely think we do need to be careful about giving up parking spots, but we also do need to make sure that there are, bike parking spaces and scooter parking, and that we are focusing on public transit and pedestrians as well, especially since our density on Solano is going to be changing. The height restrictions are going to be changing in order to accommodate the additional density. We're going to need to really think smart about how to make sure everybody can come and enjoy the space, and think broadly about how they're getting to us. I thought it was interesting that they identified antique shops on Solano, which I think 20 years ago there were a lot of antique shops on Solano, but I wouldn't say there are so many anymore, maybe one or two.
Nail shops.
I would like to encourage the efforts to do murals and live walls to extend that down on the western side of Solano as well, to create continuity. I think that we need to make sure that the business district is presented as one continuous district. And if, I mean, already the eastern and western sides are going to look very different, which they currently do. But I think the more we can do to make them all flow together, the better off we'll be, sort of putting ourselves out there as a united front. I also, the electricity that's been added to the light poles on on Western Solano, pardon me, has been great, and I hope that that is included in the plan for complete streets. I love seeing the opportunity for benches to be in there for public gathering, the statues and sculptures where people can interact with. It makes people want to come and stay, which is what business owners, I think, want. Let's see. I think if we can think about this as perhaps an opportunity, looking at trying to bring a farmer's market to Albany, which is on our work plan. Perhaps the rerouting of Key Route would be a great opportunity to sort of identify that as a space to include that in the plan as we're designing it. Let's see here. Same, where's my, sorry, I'm getting a little lost on my notes here. I hope that when we're doing this, the sidewalks can be kept open for business, and that we can be creative about making sure that customers can access the businesses while construction's happening. I have been through this in a couple other locations. I opened my store in Albany right after the streets had been done, but I have been through it in other locations, and it really has had a big impact, even if the sidewalk is open. But if we can minimize the hardship on businesses as this is happening, I think that's really important. I don't know how much of the work can be done at night, and how much of it can be done with plywood sidewalks that at least allow access, but I think that's really important if we can think about that. And then you mentioned left turn arrows on Masonic at Solano. I think that that's wonderful. I think that's a huge safety improvement, but I'd also like to encourage you to add this to Marin at Masonic. I can't tell you how many close calls I have witnessed myself between pedestrians, cars, bikes, but I think just generally, aside from economic development, it would be something that we should look into. Sorry. And then I also think that we need to use this new look for our downtown as a marketing advantage. So another part of our work plan is our marketing efforts to try to promote the district to both customers and potential businesses. And I think that we need to really leverage this as a benefit and as a reason why people should come and choose to put their business here. So that's all I got.
Great, thank you. You have any comment on your end? I'm going to look and defer.
At the end there.
Okay.
So first of all, the plan seemed really well put together. It was very well written. Everything, there was a lot present in it. It was very thorough. But I think my main concerns with it was something we saw a lot of stuff, a lot of material sent to us about the bike paths and about that access, because I think the plan doesn't really have very much for cyclists. You know, I'm someone who I've been bicycling up and down Solano since I was about 10, and getting almost hit by cars backing out of or coming out of their spots has always been a problem, or almost getting pinned between them as someone's pulling into them. So I think back in slanted parking should really be explored, and I think it is a shame that in this plan it does, you know, it basically says you can go to Washington or you can go on Marin, and there's not a lot that makes it more accessible for bikes when the goal is to be the complete streets plan, be for everyone. and make it more accessible for all the ways that people access Solano. And I understand from the materials that we were sent that there was some discussion about this at the traffic meeting, and that there were there was another sort of alternate proposal floated that may be explored. And I think that should probably be explored where we have the asymmetric way of parking with parallel on one side and slanted on the other, because it seems like we can maintain about the same level of parking with that plan. And then the other concern I had is that it seemed like a lot of the time the plan said, you know, we're shrinking the street slightly, and that's not advised because we have buses on the street and things like that. And so when the plan said in a lot of places that this isn't advisable because of this, but doesn't offer a lot of alternative or how it's going to avoid that. So I think I would hope there would be more detail about that, about, you know, there are going to be buses on Solano, there are going to be a lot of trucks, and how are we going to maintain enough space for them?
Okay, thank you. Any comment?
Yeah, I'll kind of keep it quick. I guess my first comment is a question, and again, it's no attack on this current project, but I was around 15 years ago when they rebuilt San Pablo to Masonic, and the street looks great between San Pablo and Masonic. Why was there a decision to reinvent the wheel, so to speak, and not just go with a plan that already existed that was implemented? Do you know?
I think the state of the art of urban design has improved quite a bit, and we're trying to do a little bit better.
Cool. I just bring that up. I think Stephanie mentioned the word cohesion, and having the district have some sort of visual cohesion. And I thought it was striking that we took what we studied and had discussed long and late nights discussing the improvements between San Pablo and Masonic, and 10 years later, but I guess in this world 10 years is a long time. I just want to mirror Robert Chasey's comment about street maintenance. Like when these things are proposed, they have grandiose plans about bike lanes. I don't know if anybody's seen the green paint that the cars and buses run over by Belmont Village, which looked pristine a year ago when that bike path was put in, but now looks dingy. So it's always nice to have a plan for future maintenance for this kind of thing. I know the Solano Avenue Association has concerns over bulb outs and islands. I mean, first of all, pedestrian islands in the middle of the street may not help a Solano Avenue stroll, especially in terms of a parade or safety, in terms of people navigating the street. I do notice on the Blue Glove crew, in fact, we have pictures of Monday's walk, that oftentimes when you look at those bulb outs that are not universally used in other cities, we're special, the curbs by those bulb outs are often chunked out because obviously cars are running into them. We find hubcaps. We found a hubcap Monday next to a bulb out that had been run over. So I don't know. I'm not a traffic engineer. I guess they are what the cool kids are using. But the evidence that I see is that they are dangerous, inconsistent, and I just don't know about islands. I just know that it would prevent a stroll parade from happening. As far as the notes that came in from Preston, I admire Preston personally. It was all just a little bit too overwhelming to analyze in the last 8 business hours. But I think a lot of the points that Preston makes are really meritable. As far as like some of the parking stuff is concerned, as far as back-end parking, I don't think that's actually on the much under consideration anymore. I'm not sure about that. But I just want to thank Preston for putting together a pretty complex and comprehensive package. And at the same time, I'm always scared of messing with things that seem to work okay. Why experiment? Why? I've been walking the streets for about 10 years. Originally, I was walking every day for 2 hours a day. Now I walk the streets 3 days a week, 2 hours a day, so that's 6 days a week. I'm on the commercial districts, and I've never seen anybody injured, except for the one little old lady that had her leg down in that tree well that she fell into by Sizzler. I've never seen a bike down. So I'm just not sure what we're addressing. I mean, are we dangerous? I don't know. But I just don't feel the need for experimentation when things seem to be okay. And it requires, a lot of this requires a lot of leap of faith on the behalf of the merchants. I mean, these people have spent a lot of money being there. They're invested into their business, and here's an idea that may or may not help them. We don't know. But I'll tell you what, merchants, you're the ones that are going to take the gamble here. And that's the part I have concerns about. Thank you.
I have a few more things that I didn't get to say.
Oh, please.
Had a few more.
Yeah.
And I just really fast. I respectfully.
You screwed up everything.
I respectfully disagree, Alan. I think that actually just sticking with the status quo doesn't open us up to opportunity, and I feel like there could be a lot of potential for making Solano even more attractive to both customers and businesses. And I think if we keep it the way it is, it looks dated and is less attractive. So anyway, but the things that I wanted to add were kind of touching on what Robert brought up about street trees. I would encourage you to make sure that the street trees that are chosen, that their canopies are tall enough that they don't block the fronts of the businesses or their signage. So make sure that the canopies are tall. I also think there's an opportunity perhaps to include a public stage for performances and performing arts within on Solano Avenue, which I think could potentially be great for community and business, as well as Solano Stroll. And then the utility boxes on Solano, I think there could be a lot of opportunity to have a coordinated effort to do some kind of artistic, painting of them, which would create, be attractive as well as prevent graffiti. So I would love to see those things explored as well. And then again, from an economic development point of view, I think we need to make it as easy as possible for people to get to our district and to just get there and be able to enjoy what we have to offer.
So can I respond to Stephanie now?
Okay. Counter.
So as far as status quo, I completely agree. Our status quo right now is dangerous streets and dangerous sidewalks. At the same time, this plan does not mention futuristic things like temporary parking for Uber drivers that are now parking in red zones. There's a lot of attention that can be made for those cutting edge type of things, and I completely agree with that. This plan talks about bicycle safety, and that's kind of it to a degree. And at the same time, there are other things that we can do to enhance our district. So I do not believe the status quo is it, because, yeah.
Great, understood. Any other final comments before? Yes, Robert.
No, go ahead. I had a couple of things I would add. But no, I'm happy to have you go.
Mine's really quick.
We're all so nice to each other.
As long as we're getting to the B list. So I just wanted to mention that Patch put out that Albany is now listed as the #3 suburban city, desirable place to live in the state of California. They listed all the things that I think are true, vis-a-vis schools and walkability and all that. They listed us, they gave A's and A pluses, but they listed us as dangerous. They gave us a C+ for crime. And I'm not quite sure the criteria for that, because I think as cities goes, and I've lived in a bunch of them, including New York, Chicago, and other places, Albany's about as safe as it gets. So I was curious about that.
Shooting on Masonic.
Don't believe everything you read on the internet.
So the other thing I want to say, is I love the designs, for bulb outs and so on, provided that they're used the right way. But I have to question whether some of them are actually practical enough for motor vehicles. It looked like the turns are so tight that you actually couldn't accomplish them. So, you know, and also you couldn't accomplish them without driving smack into the cars that are coming the opposite way on the street. It didn't look like there was enough room at the corner for two cars to comfortably get by each other. And that's not even talking about trucks. So I have to, I wonder if those are drawn too tightly. As to the center island, there's just not enough room on Solano Avenue for a center island. And I think the idea is get people across the street. We don't want them pausing in the middle for coffee, you know. Let them just get across the street. The stage, the idea of stage on Solano, and thank you for bringing that up. We've talked a lot about this, and a great spot for it is at Tacoma. Instead of doing the kind of thing where we just expand the sidewalks and squeeze the street, which is what seems to be done, close it and turn that whole street, that huge intersection, into a place for staging. It'd be great. You know, you could back it up a little bit, and you'd have to get Berkeley's cooperation, but it would be a wonderful spot for some kind of gathering. At a minimum, be a great gathering spot, but it would be just a perfect spot for a stage. And you're only about a long block away from Peralta Park, so you'd have those two things working together in unison. So I think it'd be a great idea. There can't be enough bicycle parking and scooter parking and so on the street. I hear people whining, oh my God, it's on the sidewalk. It's okay. The sidewalks are 99% empty most of the time. So I think scooters, bicycle parking, and all that, they take up hardly any spot. Amy runs around. Anybody who'll put up $350, she'll put one of those bicycle parking things that you can attach to. They're great. I think we should support them. And anything we can do to support people who are using alternate transportation, we should do. But not necessarily to make it impossible for cars, but to make it more attractive not to use them.
Okay. Thank you. I just have a few questions for staff as well. As far as the funding goes, I know you talked about different, but what is the timetable for funding? Is it really based upon kind of the gas tax or these other kind of funding sources, or is it competing with from a regional perspective? You just walk me through that, or is there a general fund? Is that what we're looking at?
We really don't have anything sorted out on that. I would expect that it's a combination of things like gas tax, some of which we get, and we can decide how we want to allocate it. The Alameda County Transportation Commission receives revenues through tax measures that have been approved by county voters, and some of that is allocated to us on formulas, and other times it's competitive grants. And then state and federal sources of funds are available. And you kind of have to be patient and opportunistic, and sometimes these programs come along and they'll have one particular emphasis or another, and then we want to just take advantage of it as they come along.
So that was my second question. So then ultimately this plan will have prioritization to some degree, but yet kind of like a menu, so if a special grant comes in, or will there be kind of like a phasing in theory?
That's a tough question to answer. You know, it's usually easier to execute projects in phases. It's easier to get smaller chunks of money at a time, and it's less disruptive to the whole district to have it torn up for 6 months or a year. But in some cases, you just kind of have to do it all at once. If you're trying to fix an intersection, you need to get all the curb ramps aligned and sidewalks aligned and so forth. And you kind of need to do it all at once. And then if you're doing one intersection, you're kind of, it sets off a domino effect where you're going up the street. And I think with one of the early next steps after the completion of the plan is for us to sit down and engage with the community about here's how we think we can execute it. It would be very disruptive to do it all at once. I hate to do that to the business district, but sometimes if we have the money, maybe we just go ahead and do it all at once.
What's how long do you think it'll take to complete the project? I mean, I guess there's multiple ways to do it, but if we did it all at once versus if we rolled it out slowly, do you have a sense of how long it would be?
If all the money we needed dropped in our laps, I would guess it's probably 5 to 10 years. that
construction?
Of disruption?
Oh,
in the,
no, well, I'm talking about the whole process.
The whole
So,
project.
how long will streets be dug up and sidewalks? How long would we have construction active on
construction just impacts would probably be 6 to 9 months, I would guess.
I would also encourage the city to try to avoid the busy holiday season, if possible. So start it early enough that it can be complete to not impact businesses' busy time.
Go ahead.
Actually, these are comments that I made directly to the maintenance department during the course of a conversation about this. And one of the things that I find is that people's behaviors are easily swayed. So in other words, if you come to Solano Avenue and there's just one day where the streets tore up and you don't know if this is forever and there's no parking alternatives, there's no signs that say park at Safeway's parking lot or whatever, you will leave the district and stay away forever. I use an example where over the winter season, a Japanese restaurant I go to quite a bit was closed for vacation. I ended up going to another Japanese restaurant that I now eat at all the time. And what happened during the course of the reconstruction is that we changed people's patterns of behavior by driving them away from the street without signage saying, this is temporary. There was no signs that said, hey, this is going to end. For all you knew, this was like a forever thing, right? And then there was no alternatives. Park here, park there, park here. And then the result was you get frustrated, leave, free parking at El Cerrito Plaza, I'm done. And that's the danger of it, is losing people or, quote, the leakage during those moments of construction.
Great point.
Okay. So unless I hear anyone else, I'll open it up to public comment. Does anybody go?
If I could just, there are a couple of things I wanted to follow up on that I neglected to mention. I do want to mention that the Traffic and Safety Commission did reviewed the report like you are, and they did make a recommendation to the City Council to go in a little bit different direction and have a eastbound uphill cycle track for the bicyclists that be separated from vehicles. And in order to accommodate that, they would make their recommendation is to modify the parking on the south side of the street to be a sharper angle, 60 degrees rather than 45 degrees or so that it is today. And you'll probably hear more about this from public speakers. And then on the north side, make it perpendicular parking. So that I just wanted to make sure that you saw the correspondence that you received that reflect that. I didn't want to leave that without mentioning it. And then with respect to I made a comment about the pedestrian islands, and I'm kind of reflecting on it here in the last couple of minutes. I think it's not really a safe place to stand out there while cars are zooming by. In other places it can be, and we do that, but in this particular case, its effect is really more on the motorist to slow down a little bit because it's a little bit tighter. And with respect to the turning radiuses and the precise designs of the bulb outs and other features, we hear you completely. When we do design, if we're doing our job right, we're laying out some turning radiuses and making sure that a properly driven vehicle can make the turn without losing hubcaps and so forth. We can't fix bad drivers. They still will do stupid things, but we will at least design it so the vehicles that are supposed to be there, like trucks, can make the turns that they need to make.
So if I could follow up on the committees, the Transportation Traffic Committee, they recommended an alternative. So they'd recommend both plans ultimately?
I think the wording was something to the effect of approving the plan with their suggested changes.
And so do those suggested changes still need to be studied then? I mean, from a consultant perspective, or are those changes manageable?
Yeah, we will want to, and we have an obligation to the City Council to take in all the public comments and evaluate them and present them to the council as best we can with the time and resources that we have left.
Got it. Okay.
So yes, we're starting to work on that.
What kind of impact does going from 45-degree parking to 60-degree parking have on the number of spaces that are in the area?
So the public comment that you've received is that it doesn't ultimately have a net impact. That the existing number of parking can be accommodated. We haven't spent the time to evaluate that in detail.
And do you have any sense of how many spots would be reduced by going to parallel parking on the other side?
Again, we haven't
Okay.
drawn that out.
But in theory, it will be,
Yeah.
if the council decides, or before you go to council?
I think it's fair to say that the north side of the street will lose parking, and the south side of the street, so the north side getting the parallel parking will lose parking. The south side, with the closer to perpendicular parking, will get parking or add parking by making it a little bit sharper angle. So there'll be differences. It may not be significant. I don't know. You can tell us whether a change from one side of the street to the other is significant or not from a business perspective.
Yes.
I think Robert was technically
looking
first. So you had mentioned traffic and safety. I know there's a lot of people in the chambers here holding their tongues. The bike lane would be on the uphill direction, so it'd be on the south side.
Correct.
But the parallel parking would be on the north side.
That's the proposal, as I understand it.
I mean, it sounds like a lot much funner driving down Solano on a bike lane. Is there a reason why they chose the uphill versus the downhill?
Go closer to the speed of traffic going down the hill, so it's probably easier to, I don't know. That's my
I
guess.
just don't know, yeah.
Maybe I misread this, but my recollection was that what the innovation was not a bike lane on the uphill side versus the downhill side. There were bike lanes on both sides, but they had a separation lane between the cars and the bike lane on the uphill side.
I think Mr. Jordan can, when you have his opportunity to explain what they're doing.
People biting their tongues in the audience, I'm sure. When we go to public comment, I'm sure all this will be squared.
And my guess is that I saw multiple different plans, some with, some without, lots of different options to look at. My concern about the more perpendicular style parking is it's dangerous enough to get in and out of these parking spots now. If you have drive-in parking and then you have to back out, it's going to be even more dangerous. So yes, you might gain more parking spaces, but it might be more dangerous for the pedestrians, the bicyclists, the motorists, the trucks, the buses, just because of lack of space.
Agreed.
Is the protection for the bike lane on the new proposal, is it protected by parked cars, or is it?
I think you better address those questions to Preston.
Okay, so I think we have questions, but we're going to now turn over for public comment. And are there folks in the audience who'd like to present? And I do want to be mindful of our time, so while we'd love to hear your presentation, public comment is...
Would you like us to run the clock for any amount of time? Or?
Well, let's see how this goes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, I wasn't planning to present, although I did present it in about 12 minutes to Traffic and Safety Commission, of which I am a commissioner, but I'm here as an individual. But I will say that the Traffic and Safety Commission unanimously approved the plan as long as it had the addition of this alternative. So some aspects to this alternative, it does not have a cycling lane downhill. You're right, Committee Member Sala, that the idea is people can ride fast enough downhill that they can basically flow with traffic as they do now. The danger for cyclists is more going uphill because they're going so much more slowly. And so in that case, they would have a separated lane. In terms of the angle of the parking, the model for going to 60-degree angle parking is Solano between San Pablo and Masonic. That parking is 60 degrees now. So if you think that that's reasonable, then it should be reasonable in all parts of Solano. So by doing that, you're able to maintain the parking. Actually, after the Traffic and Safety Commission, I went through and took my shot at quantifying what the parking would look like by measuring, Google Maps is a great tool. You can measure curb lengths and everything else. And came up with, and this would be accurate but not precise, basically the same parking. I came out with one fewer parking space. The big difference is that, and I didn't realize it, the parking inventory net right now is very asymmetric. So there is much more parking on the north side than there is on the south side, which I hadn't perceived before. I think there are 70-something parking spaces on the south side of this mid-Solano section, and there's over 100 on the north side. What this would do is would reverse that, so that that is a change. So while the inventory would stay the same, you'd end up with a lot more parking on the south side, just like right now you have a lot more parking on the north side. Is that good, bad? What does that do to business? I don't know. That's not my realm. If you would go back to the first slide, though, of the presentation here. Well, maybe the second slide, the one that had the goals. Yeah, there we go. So it says improve pedestrian and bicyclist safety. The primary alternative that you're presented with would actually degrade cycling safety because it narrows the lanes so severely at the intersections. So it's a complete fail in that regard. The design that's been put forward, and I would agree with Committee Member Kane, it's very similar to what was done between San Pablo and Masonic. And it wasn't 10 years ago, it wasn't 15 years ago, it was 20 years ago that it was rebuilt. And so I'm very disappointed because, yes, there has been dramatic advances in planning, the planning field, but this plan doesn't exhibit those. And putting in a cycle track is one of those advances. So I provided some statistics from the MTC, from the census, that over half the people in this area do not drive to work. And work is the most likely trip that people will drive to. Shopping, they're less likely to drive, actually. And so you have a choice. You can go with this primary alternative, which is very wasteful of space on the street with the 45-degree angle parking and adding more parking spaces, or you can repurpose that space to draw in people who might not be coming now because they don't feel like it's safe to come. There's a lot of research out there. This last bullet, support economic activity. You know, the emerging research and peer-reviewed literature is that people who bike actually spend more per month than people who drive. And you can fit 8 people who bike into a single parking space as long as you give them a single car parking space, as long as you give them a way to feel safe to get there. And what worldwide experience has shown is that people are not going to bike on Solano with traffic. They will bike if you give them a cycle track uphill. And part of what works well with this is with the cycle track uphill, you have the bike lane on Marin downhill, so people can actually circulate and they never have to make a left turn onto an arterial when they're cycling. So, and it will connect to the Albany Greenway. So it would make this an absolutely unique commercial area, to my knowledge, in the East Bay in terms of its cycling accessibility. This plan also is very underwhelming in terms of its sidewalk user amenities. So it touts that it would create 10-foot wide sidewalks. Well, the sidewalks on the section of Solano between Masonic and San Pablo are about 10 feet, but they're measured from the building to the face of the curb. If you actually go out there and if you walk it a lot during the day when it's busier, lunchtime, evening, weekends, you realize it's not actually 10 feet. When you have the street trees, the light poles, the chairs, street furniture, you know, there's places where it's like 4 to 5 feet wide. And that's not a very inviting place for people to walk. So if I'm walking with a friend side by side and somebody's coming the other way, we can't, you know, we all have to kind of do this dance. One of us has to draw back, move forward, turn sideways. And that's not really an inviting, and I know one of the charges of this body is to create an inviting and vital business area, and that's not really an inviting area when people just can't stroll and talk to each other and not really be worrying about dancing around other people. So I think economically the alternative that is the Traffic and Safety Commission approved unanimously would actually do a lot more. Obviously there's the issue of getting there in terms of construction. I think building the primary alternative that's proposed here would be worse than doing nothing. And I served on the Alameda County Transportation Commission's BPAC committee, and we oversaw granting activities. And I don't think the primary alternative would ever compete well. I don't think it would ever get a single grant because it's very 1990s. And you can look at the experience of Albany applying for a grant to redo San Pablo just recently, and it was denied by the state. So this design, the primary design doesn't have anything that's going to attract granting agencies to fund it because it's 2 decades out of style. So if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them. But my ask to you as an individual is that you also support the inclusion of this other alternative into the final document. I'm not asking you to say it should be the alternative, the primary alternative, but it should at least be in there so it can be considered and studied down the line. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you mind in case there's questions?
Sure.
Do we have questions? We had questions before.
He's comprehensive.
What are the main differences between your alternative proposal and the one that was originally presented?
You mean the main alternative?
Uphill bike lane or?
Yeah. So it has much wider sidewalks. So you're basically you have a choice to make, or you don't have to make that choice now. But the choice is: do you attribute more space to motorists and motor vehicles or to people. So it has wider sidewalks, so it would actually be more comfortable than Solano between San Pablo and Masonic. It has the cycle track. It has the parallel parking on the north side. So those are really the main differences. Otherwise, it has a 2-lane crossing the way Western Solano does now with the bulb outs. So it follows that model, which I agree seems to work well. So it's just a much more efficient use of space. I mean, 45-degree angle parking is a very inefficient use of space because you have all the wasted space in front of each and every vehicle. So yeah, so those are, I think, the main differences. Yeah, sure.
And this plan would allow or accommodate the buses and the trucks and the circulation that apparently Solano Avenue provides for?
Yeah, so the plan, the distance from mid-block from curb to center line on Western Solano is 29.5 feet. And so it has that same dimension for the southern side. And then for the northern side, it had an 8-foot wide parallel parking lane, which is wider than typical, but you know that allows for larger vehicles, more typical to 7 feet, but 8 foot for larger vehicles, and it has a 12-foot traffic lane, which again is wider than often used. So 20 foot combined is plenty wide enough for bus and truck. So it's actually, I think, more workable than the primary alternative. I mean, when I saw those islands in the primary alternative, I was like, it does not seem good for truck bus route.
Thank you. Any other comment? Great, thank you for your...
Sure, thank you.
Anyone else?
I've got a lot of things going through my head right now, so I apologize in advance. Todd Abbott, Albany resident, business owner, board of the Chamber and the Solano Association. I wanted to say, first off, to Preston and the like, that the reason businesses are so conservative is because their livelihood's on the line. So when we propose something different like this, you're asking, like Alan said, to take a leap of faith. And I think I'm going to surprise people by saying I think we should. I think it's a good plan. When I saw Preston's plan, I did a lot of research on my own. And it tends to be, I mean, in fact, there don't seem to be significant studies saying otherwise, that bicycle infrastructure can increase business. It's not going to increase business for everybody. The carpet stores aren't going to probably increase business. The antiques that sell furniture is not going to increase business. That's why you don't lose any parking. You're not losing anything. You're not gaining the 12 spaces you're going to gain otherwise, but you're not losing. So anyway, I just want to say I support this idea. I think it's, you know, have an open mind and be very, you know, kind of consider all the options. And that's really all I have to say. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. Jennifer Hansen, Romero, Albany resident, president of Solano Avenue Association. Something that came up to me today, ironically, in a Facebook post. And so this is going to be me by saying I absolutely agree. Updates do need to be made. But before we even get into bed with doing the updates and everything else, what I'd like to do is just have everybody kind of take a step back and say, what are we going to do right now? Because there's a lot of deferred maintenance, everything else going on currently existing that we need to be doing something about. And I'll pull up here. Sorry, I lost it. There was a comment about how bad the streets were during these repairs and stuff. And I'll just read this one gentleman who's lived here all of his life as well. He says, in fact, there's a lot of roads in Albany I don't drive anymore because they're letting them go to literally potholes everywhere while they spend money all over town trying to make it look pretty, but they don't fix anything that's gone bad. So before we continue to make things look pretty, to put the millennial spin on things, we need to take care of what actually needs to be taken care of. And I sent this to Rochelle and Peggy today as well because I wanted them to have their eyes on it. And Rochelle also commented in this agreeing that, you know, I guess the pavement condition index is atrocious. In our last MTC survey in 2017, we had a rolling average of 59, which puts us at the at-risk category. Okay? These are the kind of things that we need to be safety, traffic, safety, whoever. Bicyclists, potholes will hurt too, right? So we need to invest in being safe in what we have currently, not wait for a plan that's going to roll out 5 to 10 to 15 maybe years from now. The other thing that I would just want to say is over time, since I've lived here, I've seen a huge amount of decrease of police activity actually monitoring people who are bad drivers, bad cyclists, bad pedestrians, not being out there and finding them for things that they're doing. So what do they do? They keep, you know, everybody who's doing the bad thing continues to be bad because there's no parent saying, you're not supposed to do that. Go stand in the corner, you know. I mean, my grandmother, who was a crossing guard there on the corner at Cornell, used to make kids get off their bicycles and walk them across the street because that was the safe way to do. People are just willy-nilly all over the place doing whatever the hell they want to do. So that's my other thing, is I think we need more police activity, you know, basically punishing people who are doing bad things, and maybe the bad things will stop happening so often. My last thing is just simply on as far as design. I said earlier about the millennial design of things. When the part of Solano below Masonic was done, whether it be 10, 15, 20 years ago, it looked great then. Everybody thought, wow, this is fantastic. This is an upscale look. Well, what we have to make sure we do is, in order to blend that, in order to make a continuous, cohesive look, is choose things that are classical. A classic look as opposed to the next new-fangled thing. This city is not big enough to be like going out and redesigning your house every 5 years. We're not going down to Ethan Allen and picking out the latest color from Pantone, you know. So just be careful about what kind of designs are brought in, and that they're not just a modern new wave fangle thing, but that they actually have a classic look that Albany is used to having. So, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name's Ian Mcleod. I'm on the Planning and Zoning Commission, but I'm also just here as myself, my own comments. Yeah, thank you for having this discussion. I'd like to echo some of Preston's comments. I've been following this very closely and have a lot of interest in this design and how things are moving forward. You know, and there are a lot of reasons to redesign Solano. The status quo, in my opinion, is not really acceptable. The previous design in the lower part of Solano basically is a 20th century design. Things are a lot different now. There are a lot of different issues, a lot of different mobility factors, climate change. There are a number of city policies and programs that this Complete Streets plan as presented here does not address at all. One of them is the active transportation plan, which is to reduce automobile use, promote other active ways of getting around town, mostly walking, bicycling, scooters, reducing automobile use and congestion. I think that's a huge issue around town. I think it's a huge climate change issue. We're trying to make progress on greenhouse gas reductions. Bicycling is a non-polluting method of transportation. It's pretty much ignored as a way of going up and down Solano when this current plan is presented. I really appreciate the Transportation and Safety Commission's approach. I think putting protected bike lanes going uphill is great. I would go further. I would put protected bike lanes both sides. I know there would be a loss of parking. That's kind of the, you know, the big elephant in the room and the sacred cow. But on the other hand, I've been doing a lot of reading. I've been looking at other cities' experiences all over North America, all over Europe. And like Mr. Abbott, I've been reading case studies, and there are quite a few studies that show that when cycle tracks are put into commercial districts, that the districts, their business actually improves, that over time things get better. It creates a better urban livable environment, congestion goes down. So it provides an economic benefit. Property values go up, merchants get more money in their pocket. You know, in terms of economic development, I think that's something that I would really hope you would take the time to look at these things. I sent a letter yesterday with a bunch of attachments. I don't know if probably no one's read them, but there are case studies. City of New York has a new set of metrics for evaluating bicycle boulevards, their impact on businesses. Generally, everything I've been reading states that investing in bike infrastructure is a net positive for commercial districts. I think what's lacking in Albany right now is a comprehensive network of bicycling that would bring more people to Solano Avenue. And I think if you did cycle tracks up and down, I mean, I would be happy if we got them going up at least, but I think both directions, you would be making it safer for kids and families, safer for adults who aren't really confident cyclists to come. And I think in the long run, you will be getting more people to Solano Avenue. I think that's the bottom line. It's not cars, it's people. And I think if we link to BART, docking bike stations there, docking bike stations along Solano, make it safer for kids and families to go up and down, access all those shops, offices, amenities, even allowing people to bike to work and park their bike and go into their store and work all day without taking up a parking space, I think that's nothing but a positive. You know, and like somebody mentioned, emerging technologies or different ways of accessing or different transportation modes. We've got Lyft, Uber, ride sharing, scooters. Problem with this plan is that there's nowhere for scooters to ride. So they are coming. So if they're there, they're either going to ride on the sidewalks or out in the street. So I think another advantage of cycle tracks is that you give a safe place for scooters to ride. You know, automated vehicles are coming. They're not going to need parking spaces. Lyft and Uber don't need parking spaces. You get more people riding all over town, you're going to be able to bring an order of magnitude greater number of people that can park bikes on Solano than you can ever park cars. I mean, the share of car parking is very finite. And you probably don't get that many people per car either. You know, there are solutions to some businesses, delivery services, you know, could help ease the pain of some parking loss, but I think more drop-off and pickup zones would also ease the pain where, you know, if you'd have to put something in your vehicle that's from the rug store, you have a drop-off and pickup zone nearby. And that would also make it a little more easy to, you know, make a transition. But I'm really considering this as a chance to go to a much more low-carbon future, healthier outcomes for Albany residents, safer for kids and families. I think it would be a great corridor. I don't see it as a bike expressway with these cycle tracks, but more as a way to create access and access to all the shops. So, you know, I'd really appreciate you keeping an open mind about how it is an economic development issue, and if you do have a chance to read case studies, I think it would be very enlightening. Almost everything I've read has shown it to be a net positive to put cycle tracks in commercial districts. So,
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I don't think we missed anyone. So with that, any last comment? We'll close public comment and bring it back for our final discussion or recommendation. Anybody want to kick it off?
I just want to echo one thing that Jennifer said about, you know, just bringing up the Periscope today. I find that we spend a lot of time at the dinner table discussing what we're going to have for dinner next year. And the reality is we're at the dinner table now, and there are real issues now. I don't know how much time was used at Traffic and Safety Commission meetings discussing all of this. when you and I walk down the street and have tripped and fallen picking up stuff. So just keep in mind, that today is important as well. Thank you, Jennifer, for making that point.
Anyone else? The only thing I would add to that, yes, we have to worry about today, but if the money and the programs and the funding is coming that don't necessarily address today, it's supposed to be addressing the future, that's the kind of differential that kind of the state and the federal and all the other kind of programmatic things, they are incentivizing cities to do certain things, to accomplish certain things, not necessarily take care of today, which is then put on the city for future. Yes, Robert?
So I have a question for Jeff and then a comment.
Yeah, I noticed that earlier.
Oh, sorry. So I have a question for Jeff and then a comment. When is the city going to take some action on this one, do you think? When do you think the city is going to take action on this?
The City Council is tentatively scheduled to take action on this on April 15th. Things can change, something more urgent pops up, but right now that's the schedule that we're working towards.
So we would have time for one more meeting before that?
You would have your early April meeting, yes.
Because I'm just wondering if, I don't know if we're ready to make a recommendation tonight. A lot of good ideas were thrown around, and I'd like to go back and look again. I read I don't think I read everything that was thrown at us at the last minute, but I read in general what I had, and I'd like to look at it a little bit more before I would propose a recommendation. That's one thing. The second thing that I wanted to say was, I just want to give the city some kudos for the work they've been doing on the maintenance. It's way, way better. And that's been happening over the last 3 years. So, you saw the inklings of it, and now a lot of the major problems have been addressed on the sidewalks and some in the street. So, anyway, it's so easy to skip and not bother mentioning that. So pass it along. City's doing some good things. Anyway. So.
Okay. Any other comment? Yep, Aaron?
Yeah. So on the subject of the design and how we're making everything look, I think as someone who's a little bit younger and from a different generation, there's I think it is a good chance to modernize things and make them look modern, interesting, but I think the most important part of that, besides how we're designing a bicycle rack or what we're just the decoration of it, is the most important part of that is the actual design of how it's accessible. So more important than the look and feel of it is does it have protected bike lanes, does it have access for pedestrians? That's the thing that I think people like me and a lot of people in the younger generation notice as that's the sign of modernization, not the design of the park benches or the parklets or anything like that. It's how is the infrastructure designed, how accessible is it, and how modern is that?
I'd also go to say that our purview here is economic development. So the other question would be, how does that help economic development, just in terms of our responsibility here? And we've talked a lot about design and all that, but ultimately, how does it help economic activity? I don't know.
Robert?
So just a comment. I don't want to quarrel with what people said, but I've seen a lot of accidents on Solano over the years, and because I've been here a really long time, and I'm right on Solano every day. And so what I would say, my observation is that going downhill on a bicycle in Solano creates greater perils than going uphill, because you're going at a much faster clip and cars backing out don't see you coming. Cars going down pull in and they don't realize you're gaining on them. So if we're going to do bike lanes, and we can, and I don't know if it's feasible, but I like the idea of bike lanes both ways if people are going to be on Solano. I don't think you need to choose between cars and bikes in this situation, although I do and am sympathetic to the issue of climate change issues. But people will move away from cars when you offer them better alternatives. And if there is a way to provide sufficient parking, sufficient space on Solano for cars, bicycles, scooters, and different methods of transportation. Safety is a key issue, and you're absolutely right. One of the key things you look for in terms of modern design is, can you make it inviting and safe for not only a 35-year-old cyclist who can sort of fend for himself, but a 35-year-old cyclist with a 3-year-old on the back, or having a 7-year-old riding on the street. So those issues are really important. And if you're going to put and invite people, families, and kids to be out on the street, I mean, the last thing in the world you want to see, and I've seen it, is an adult with a kid on the bike, on the back of the bike in a seat where it's completely treacherous. And you think you have to be crazy to be putting your kid at that risk. So yeah, we can do it. We can do better. Maybe we need to figure out some other solution for parking. We've talked about this in the past, about having places just off Solano for parking that would allow us to reduce parking on Solano so that you could accommodate these various things all within the narrow 80 feet that we have to play with. Maybe a wider sidewalk on the north side of the street where the sun hits, and a narrow one on the south side might be a way to give you the extra footage so that you could get in a bike lane that would be safe. But that's why I say that I'm not prepared to make a recommendation tonight. I'd like to think about it a little bit more. A lot of good ideas came out, and it requires some reflection on my part.
But at the same time, it's not an either or, right? It's saying we like Plan A and Plan B is cool too. I don't see what.
Well, let me ask something from staff. So if we do postpone a recommendation until the next month, you folks are preparing your staff report. I mean, would it be still incorporated, or would it just be not as, I guess, like, how would it be incorporated? Can it be incorporated? And just so we understand.
So your next meeting would be April 4th. And our work as staff needs to be delivered to the city manager the morning of the 5th. So yes, we could certainly incorporate whatever actions you were to take that on April 4th and fold it into the report. If there were, we might have an hour or two to do a little bit of work to follow up or amplify on something that you did, but we wouldn't have time to go into depth. If you wanted us to research something some more, we probably wouldn't be able to do that and deliver it to the city council in the written staff report. Now, sometimes if something comes up at the last minute, we'll do it and just verbally report on it, or occasionally a supplemental written staff report. But if you wanted to defer it to April 4th, yes, please feel free to go ahead and do that, and it would show up in writing in the staff report.
Go ahead, Steph.
Are we able to submit our comments from today in some fashion? Do we have to vote on that, or can you bring up a list of points that were brought up, or I'm not sure how it works? Or do we have to?
I think ultimately, if you could take a motion that kind of encapsulates the themes that you've talked about, we can, based on the comments you've made, we can work on that so that at your next meeting, we try to capture the essence of what you're talking about and concisely, and you can edit that or not, however you want.
Yeah, maybe that would be all right.
Does that work for you? So, because, I was prepared to make a motion for you folks to gather our information or the information provided and submit the two plans for future development or to be considered by council. But if the committee would rather have more time, digest and provide more input, then that's fine too.
Yeah, I think we could give you a draft, you can edit it on the 4th, and we'd have time to make the final changes in the morning of the 5th and get our work done.
Yeah, Robert?
I like that approach.
Okay.
I will be on an airplane that night, but you guys can meet without me.
Well, we'll be sure to incorporate every word you said.
Oh, you took good
So,
notes.
so Robert, do I hear that you're okay with
Yes.
do you want to make the motion then? Or?
I move that we incorporate the comments that the committee made tonight into a draft recommendation and bring that back next time to see if it needs any fine-tuning to be submitted to the city as our recommendation.
Would you also consider the two proposals at this point as a recommendation to move forward, or would you still want time to, you can still add comments I guess, on the 4th
Yeah,
to those two. But as a motion of this body, do you think we would want to do
I think
that?
we should have them ready to be included, but the thing is that there are parts of them that I like and parts of them that I'm not sure about, and that's why I want to take another look at them.
How does anyone else have any comment on that?
I don't have a second.
I'm just making sure. Do we have a second on the motion? The motion would be to gather information as presented tonight, so staff can come back to us on the 4th. And at the 4th, we would look at that recommendation from the comments made. And then we could also add the 2 proposals at that time based upon further comment. That's what I understood.
Sure.
Are we comfortable with that? If so,
I'll second.
there's a second on that. Any comments or further discussion on the motion? So all those in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? So carries unanimously.
So it's important that we have a quorum at the next meeting then.
And what day is that?
It's the first Thursday of the month. We need to have
Yeah.
everybody here then, if that's the case. So.
Good
Jeff,
point.
you're confident that you can pull that off? The less than, well, the 12, 14-hour turnaround?
Yeah, we do it all the time.
He just won't sleep.
Miracle
But
worker.
yeah, he'll
Well,
do it.
the thing is that we'll pretty much have the bulk of the report ready anyway. Yeah,
Well, I should be there. Anyone, you
I'll
won't
be.
be there?
I'll be.
I'll be there.
Almost sure, yeah.
Are you available on the 4th?
Yes.
Okay, so we should be fine. All right, thank you. So with that, we'll move on to item 6-2, subcommittee reports. I'll just read them down the line, unless staff has specific comments on these. So do we have any reports from the Business Improvement District? That's Brown and Chastely. Any comments on that? Reports?
I will get you guys the amount that we pay into bids in other cities. We pay into a bid in Burlingame, Nevada, and Walnut Creek. So,
All 3?
yeah.
Wow.
So I'll let you know how much we pay just as a point of reference.
All right.
Are those property-based bids or business license-based bids?
That's why I need to look into
Okay,
it.
because property is going to be based on the size of the property. So it really
Not
throws off things.
necessarily, But anyway. Farmers Market,
We were going to meet and then we're ill and weren't able to, so we haven't met yet.
And we're talking about having a presentation either in April or May at a meeting for farmers market. Sounds like maybe May would be better for you.
okay, marketing and outreach. I think we have a plan set forth for next month to kind of provide staff some overarching ideas and then have staff opine on those ideas. So Aaron and I will be talking about that. And then Arts Committee.
Yes, I had coffee with Jenny Holland of the, she's the chair of the Art Committee. It was really kind of a get-to-know-you coffee. But one or two things that came out of it was she would like to work with us on putting together a business contact list. I would think that already exists somewhere.
Can you describe what that contact list is? It's just a list of
SAA.org.
Names and phone numbers, you know, be able to get to somebody in that business who's a decision maker.
So in general, if I can comment on that, we do not provide personal information for business owners on Solano Avenue. If we did, they would be overwhelmed. However, if she has a message that she would like transmitted to the businesses, we would do that for her.
Oh,
But we
okay,
don't provide
so-
personal information, mailing labels, or anything like that.
Okay. And then she said that she'd like to see more emphasis on the performing arts as opposed to the visual arts, which is going back to the stage idea in the
The covered stage idea, the
Yeah,
weathered
yeah.
covered stage idea.
And she mentioned that the cost of city performance permits is very high, and she'd like to see that lowered. And that's what we discussed at coffee.
Well done.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for doing that.
Okay, so item 7 is future agenda items. So I heard one during the presentation about continuing to have the parking supply continue on the on
I
the
don't have
agenda?
anything to add to any future agenda items. That was my only.
All right, well, see what happens after 3 years.
Awesome.
Okay. Any other discussion? With that, then the next meeting is Thursday, April 4 at 5 p.m. here at City Hall. With that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
And thank you, Preston, for putting all that together.